Apple's market capitalization was around $1.6 billion. When he died in 2011, Apple's market capitalization was $350 billion. It's around a 218,000% increase. The biggest factor of Apple's success is attributed to innovation and creativity. Here is the other important factor everyone misses and no one talks about: Steve Jobs stealing. Steve Jobs stole from Steve Wozniak. That's just not stopped at Atari. Steve Jobs also stole from Xerox. That's not all. Apple's Think Different slogan was also stolen by Steve Jobs from IBM's Think slogan. He was born to a Muslim Syrian father who never loved him, and his mother, who was American, also did not want to keep him. Life was depressing for Steve Jobs. His father was Muslim and his parent who adopted him and raised him were Christians, but he was never satisfied with either of them. In 1974, Steve Jobs decided to become a monk. He went to India. Apple's success attracted competition from companies like IBM, which released its IBM PC in 1981. Jobs tried to remove Scully from Apple by engineering a board coup, but the board sided with Scully. Jobs left Apple, selling most of his stock. While Next had mixed fortunes selling computer hardware, Jobs found huge success with another project. It was called Pixar Animation Studios. In 1995, in partnership with Disney, Pixar released Toy Story, a huge box office success. In 1996, Apple announced it was buying Next. In 2005, Jobs reinvented Apple by debuting the first iPhone. Sadly, Jobs' health deteriorated. On October 5, 2011, Jobs died in his home in Palo Alto, California from cancer complications. In 1997, Apple was having severe financial problems and was on the verge of bankruptcy. The board of Apple had no other option, and they tried their last card, which was bringing back Steve Jobs. At that time, Apple's market capitalization was around $1.6 billion. When he died in 2011, Apple's market capitalization was $350 billion. It's around a 218,000% increase. Today, Apple's market cap is around $2.36 trillion and is the largest company in the world. That was all possible because of Steve Jobs' innovation and creativity, which led to the development of end products like the iPod, MacBook, iPhone, and iPad. There should be some deep down dark secret that enabled Steve Jobs to make a failing company the largest company in the world within around a decade. We will try to dig into what factors contributed to Apple's enormous success. The biggest factor of Apple's success is attributed to innovation and creativity. Steve Jobs started very reliable products and they looked very cool. Another factor that made Apple so big was marketing. Steve Jobs was a marketing genius. He sold normal products like he was selling the most important product in the world. But here is the other important factor everyone misses and no one talks about: Steve Jobs stealing. Once, Pablo Picasso said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." At the age of 13, Steve Jobs met Steve Wozniak, and later in 1976, they both founded Apple Computers. Before founding Apple, Wozniak created a game for Atari. The plan was Wozniak will create the game while Steve Jobs will sell it to Atari, and whatever the profit from sale will be equally divided between the two. Steve Jobs sold the game for $5,000 but told Wozniak that it sold for $700. This way, Jobs made $4,650. Steve Jobs stole from Steve Wozniak. That's just not stopped at Atari. Steve Jobs also stole from Xerox. The Xerox Alto was the first personal computer ever designed. It came with GUI, keyboard, and mouse, though it took a lot of resources and around a decade to build the system. Steve Jobs just took it. The modern GUI we see today is based on Xerox's hard work, but who took the credit? Steve Jobs? That's not all. Apple's Think Different slogan was also stolen by Steve Jobs from IBM's Think slogan. These days we heard that Steve Jobs hated IBM and he disliked IBM's way of working but stealing slogans. Though Steve Jobs changed the fortunes of Apple and impacted the daily lives of common people, his own life consists of ups and downs. He was born to a Muslim Syrian father who never loved him, and his mother, who was American, also did not want to keep him. Steve Jobs was always curious about his biological family. It took around 27 years to find his biological sister, Mona Simpson. Life was depressing for Steve Jobs. His father was Muslim and his parent who adopted him and raised him were Christians, but he was never satisfied with either of them. So he decided to explore Hinduism and Buddhism. He read the teachings of Neem Karoli Baba, who was a famous Hindu spiritual master. In 1974, Steve Jobs decided to become a monk. He went to India, but unfortunately, he was saddened to learn that Neem Karoli Baba was already dead. So he found another spiritual master, Haida Khan Babaji. After spending 7 months in India, he decided to go back to the USA and became a practicing Buddhist. Throughout his life, believed that Buddhism and spirituality played an important role in his success. In 2003, finally, life seemed to become fine. He got pancreatic cancer and he did not go to the doctors. Instead, went to a psychic who consulted him to use herbal remedies. At the start, he survived, but it came back and many believe delayed treatment caused Steve Jobs' death. Though Steve Jobs had a tough life, he never cared about other people. When he came back to Apple, he closed all charitable causes of Apple. He personally never funded any cause. He often parked in spots reserved for the handicapped. He also did not like to put number plates in a car, as according to California rules, number plates should be put within 6 months. So Jobs always changed cars within 6 months. Want to know the story of Steve Jobs? Watch the video till the end. We at Business Chronicles tell the stories of extraordinarily successful people. Please subscribe to our channel to help us in making more videos. Stephen Paul Jobs was born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California. His biological parents were Abdul Fattah Jandali, a Muslim, and Joanne Carol Shibely, a Christian Catholic. Because of their religious differences, the fact that they were graduate students, and that Shibely's father did not approve her relationship with Jandali, Shibely decided to give Steve up for adoption. She gave him to Paul and Clara Jobs. Paul Jobs was a machinist. He and Clara adopted another child, Patricia Jobs, in 1957 and then moved his family to Mountain View, California in 1959. Paul and Clara raised Steve in the Lutheran faith. As a boy, he attended Montaloma Elementary School where his intellect began to show. However, he was naughty, restless, and did not get along with authority. He played pranks on his teachers and classmates often. He was even suspended a couple of times. Thankfully, in 4th grade, Steve encountered a new teacher, Imogen Hill, who bribed him to study. Steve learned so much that year, his teachers wanted him to skip 2 classes and go straight to junior high. Steve ended up transferring to Crittenden Middle and then Homestead High School. As Steve grew up, he became enamored with machines. He enjoyed working with his father around machines, and his father even set up a workbench for him to work alongside him. To top it off, Mountain View was home to many engineers who worked in the burgeoning electronics industry. Steve ended up befriending many of them. At age 13, he even got a summer job at Hewlett-Packard. After graduating high school, Steve enrolled at Reed College in Oregon in 1972. However, he dropped out in his first year. Despite dropping out of Reed College, Steve Jobs remained on the college campus, sleeping in friends' dorm rooms and getting free meals at a nearby Hare Krishna temple. He also attended courses on topics he enjoyed like calligraphy. In 1974, Jobs went back home and found a job as a technician and video game designer for Atari. He worked at the company for several months, and when he had saved enough, took a trip to India in search of enlightenment. Some months later, he returned to the United States and went back to work for Atari. While at Homestead High, Jobs had befriended another electronics enthusiast, Steve Woz Wozniak. Together, they spent hours tinkering around with technology. In 1956, Woz completed the basic design of a personal computer. Back then, most computers were large and meant for corporations, not individuals. When he showed it to Jobs, Jobs immediately recognized its potential. He saw that computer hobbyists could use it to write software without having to assemble computer kits themselves. He convinced Woz that they should sell it, and on April 1, 1976, they founded Apple Computer Inc. Their first computer was the Apple I. Jobs, Woz, and another friend, Daniel Kotke, worked on Apple Computer Inc. from Jobs' garage. To fund it, Jobs sold his Volkswagen van and Woz sold his HP Scientific calculator. They got lucky when computer retailer Paul Terrell ordered 50 Apple I units for $500. In total, they sold about 200 Apple I units. Jobs spent hours looking for investors for the startup. He eventually sold former Intel executive Mike Markula on his vision. Markula invested $250,000 in Apple. In 1977, Jobs unveiled the Apple II, an 8-bit home computer and the first to come with a plastic case and color graphics. Apple followed this up by introducing the Apple Disk II, an affordable floppy drive. These two increased Apple's sales considerably. In 1980, Jobs capitalized on Apple's momentum and took it public. On its first day of trading, it reached a market capitalization of $1.2 billion, giving Jobs a net worth of over $250 million. He was only 25 years when he was featured on Forbes' list of the richest people in America. Apple's success attracted competition from companies like IBM, which released its IBM PC in 1981. Apple released Apple III, but it did not do well in the market. IBM began surpassing Apple in computer sales. Another Apple project, the Apple Lisa, despite being the first personal computer with a graphic user interface, sold poorly, doing only 100,000 units. Further, Apple's new CEO, John Sculley, whom Jobs had personally lured from Pepsi-Cola in 1980, began differing with Jobs on the direction of the company. In 1982, Jobs was pushed out of the Apple Lisa project. He retreated and took charge of the Macintosh computer project. He and his team launched the Macintosh computer on January 24, 1984. At first, the Macintosh sold well, but eventually sales declined as people began questioning its limited RAM and no hard drive connectivity. In 1985, Jobs and Sculley's arguments became worse. Jobs tried to remove Sculley from Apple by engineering a board coup, but the board sided with Sculley. Jobs left Apple, selling most of his stock. In 1985, after exiting Apple, Jobs founded Next Computer. Its first computer, the Next Cube, came out in 1988. It had its own operating system called NextStep and was the computer that Tim Berners-Lee used to make the first web browser, the World Wide Web. It was a good computer that Jobs intended to sell to learning institutions. However, he priced it at $9,999. It was too costly and sold poorly. In 1990, Jobs released the second-generation Next Cube with a magnesium case. In 1993, after selling only 50,000 Next machines, Jobs abandoned computer hardware sales and focused on software development, specifically around the NextStep operating system. While Next had mixed fortunes selling computer hardware, Jobs found huge success with another project. It was called Pixar Animation Studios. In 1986, Jobs funded a spin-out from Lucasfilm's computer graphics division. The spin-out was first named the Graphics Group and then later renamed Pixar. It was run by Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray. Jobs funded it with $50 million. Initially, Jobs wanted the company to concentrate on selling premium computer graphics workstations. However, the company had an animation studio that made money by producing animated commercials for companies. In 1989, the studio won an Academy Award for a short film called Tin Toy. In 1995, in partnership with Disney, Pixar released Toy Story, a huge box office success. That year, Jobs took Pixar public and Wall Street clamored for its stock, sending its market capitalization into the billions. Jobs, who was Pixar's largest shareholder with 80% ownership, gained a net worth of over $1.5 billion. Pixar went on to produce more box office successes, including A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, Monsters, Inc., and The Incredibles. In 2006, Disney bought Pixar in a $7.4 billion all-stock deal. Jobs became the biggest single shareholder of Disney with a 7% stake and joined its board. In 1996, Apple announced it was buying Next. Apple had struggled in the years since Jobs left, clocking loss after loss. It had undergone a number of management changes before the Next deal brought Jobs back in. In Q1 of 1997, Apple posted a $700 million loss. Concerned, Jobs worked with his friend Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, to restructure the company's management. In July 1997, Apple's board terminated the position of its then CEO, Gil Amelio. Jobs became interim CEO. One of the first acts of Jobs as CEO was negotiating with Microsoft to end a long-standing patents feud. He also convinced Microsoft to invest $150 million into Apple. Back at the company he co-founded, Jobs went into hyperdrive. He sold off unprofitable units and ended projects such as Open Dock and Newton. He made staff cuts and refocused the company to innovate. In May 1998, he led Apple's introduction of the iMac, a computer with a translucent design. It was iconic and sold well, bringing many developers onto the Mac platform. Jobs followed this up with several other successes, including colored iMacs and iBooks and the iMac TV in 1999. In 2001, Jobs moved Apple toward owning and operating its own retail outlets. In October of that year, he took Apple into the music industry by releasing the iPod. It was a commercial success. In 2004, he released the iPod mini, then later the iPod Nano and iPod Shuffle. In 2005, Jobs reinvented Apple by debuting the first iPhone. This marked a shift for Apple away from computers and into digital devices. He went on to release more advanced versions of the iPhone and then the iPad tablet in 2010. Jobs donated $50 million to Stanford Hospital. He also contributed toward finding a cure for HIV/AIDS. Jobs was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in October 2003. Initial treatments to remove the tumor went well. However, in 2006, cancer returned. In January 2009, he took a leave of absence from Apple, placing Tim Cook as acting CEO. In April 2009, Jobs underwent a liver transplant. Sadly, Jobs' health deteriorated. On October 5, 2011, Jobs died in his home in Palo Alto, California from cancer complications. He was aged 56. Then, his net worth was about $8.3 billion, and he had been listed as a primary inventor or co-inventor of 346 patents. Jobs was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. It is the highest civilian honor in the United States. Steve Jobs' life was full of ups and downs. The beginnings were tough, and he was not good at studies and did not want to waste his parents' money. The college, though, helped him to learn calligraphy, which influenced Steve Jobs to create the best design for Apple's products. Steve Jobs was a fighter. He fought his poverty, he fought with his own company Apple, and he was removed and he made a comeback. He fought with cancer, but eventually that was the only battle he lost. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this.